Okay, welcome back. So now that I have made my screen smaller on my computer, I can see when there are glitches, and actually I had to close a couple of programs which were causing it to flicker. So I hope that doesn't happen again. Hopefully this will be the last video. So let me walk you through what I did between our last video and now. So we're building out our transportation program, and let me show you what I have done. So let's start here at the bottom. There are several categories that are specific to this program, that being the van rental, the insurance for the van, and the fuel, and also some equipment maintenance for the van that we're required to do because of our lease. So let me show you what I have over on the right. I use this space for my justification. So as I'm getting ready to write the narrative at the very end of this process that shows how I got the numbers that I got, which is the budget justification, I have the numbers and the information for me. So let me show you what I did. So we have a van that is $700 a month. Now I know that sounds really cheap, but we're assuming that we can get it from someone who is very nice and is feeling like they want to help our cause. So $700 is what I put in. Times 12 months, you can see there that I have that, and that's $8,400. The insurance is $288 a month, and that is also for 12 months. A very nice insurance person who's charging us less, because our insurance has to be not only for the van, and remember we would also have agency insurance to cover all of the employees, and then we would have some liability insurance. And I haven't included all of those in the cost, since we're never going to capture everything that we need until you're actually in the situation and you can see everything that you need. But for the purposes of us learning how to think through justifications and to think through some of the costs that we'll need, I have just the van insurance, and we're going to assume that that covers the van and any liability if someone falls off of the van, etc. So that's $288 a month times 12 months, which is $3,456. And then my assumptions for fuel is that agencies are open 260 days, and that's just a rounding figure. But if you're not counting the weekends, let's say you're just open for 52 weeks, 5 days a week, you're going to be open for 260 days. And so we're figuring that the van is going to go 75 miles a day. That's 7 trips around 10 miles each, or 5 each way, with a little leeway in there. And again, this would be based on you actually tracking the mileage from your van on several days and getting an average and using that. That would be acceptable justification. We're going to assume that the van gets 13 miles to the gallon, which is actually quite high, but I'll put that in anyway, and that gas is going to be $4 a gallon, to allow for times when it might jump over that and jump under that. So we're just going to assume for it. So if you take 260 days times 75 miles a day, and divide that by 13 miles per gallon, you take that times your $4 and you get $6,000 total dollars for fuel for the year, and there you see it. And then finally, I've put in $75 every month to change the oil in any filters or any fuses, etc., that go out, times 12, which would be $900. Now my space is already calculated here based on my FTE, and you can see that my FTE changed from 50% for just the van driver to 0.57. So I have a half time, but I've added 2 other employees. So the data manager would be required to keep some of the data for this program, number of miles traveled, etc. The driver would turn it in to the data manager so we could keep track of all of the units of service, who they picked up, where they took them, was it a medical trip, or was it to the food pantry, etc. So we can't ignore that that employee has a responsibility to do that. Also, the secretary most likely would be spending a portion of time fielding calls, depending on what system we set up, whether the clients are going to text directly to the phone of the transportation worker, etc., in which case we would need to pay for a phone, because you wouldn't expect that person to use their own personal plan. So we're just going to assume that a portion of the time is that the secretary would be taking on that responsibility of making the appointments. So 5% doesn't seem to be very much, and you can imagine how much time that person would be overwhelmed with constant calls and I can't make it, and can we change it to a different time, etc. But for the purposes of us just budgeting, we're going to put in for 5%. And you'll actually be able to see why when we get to the bottom, because I have $50,000 for this program. I haven't included any time for the executive director, which I always think should be spread over all programs. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 1%. And also the program director, who the van driver would actually report to. So I'm going to put in 1% for that. But you can see these costs are adding up just putting in simple percentages for people who make a significant amount of money on a program that really doesn't have that much money to spend. So this would obviously be one of those areas where we would have to come up with more organizational money, even if we got $50,000 funding from the outside. As you can see that the bottom line with our space now for all of our employees, because it's now 0.59. Again, you can disregard this, and actually I should have taken that category out and maybe make sure it wasn't linked to anything else. And you can take it out as well. So we have almost 0.6 FTE, which is reflected here in the space because we have to pay for our, where we are. And once we've added everything else in and subtracted, remember I deleted this 65, row 65 here, because for all organizational funding, you don't charge yourself indirect costs. So if I were to be able to take this to Hearst and get them to pay it, then I would add my indirect costs back in. But I can't add that in because this is money that actually I'm going to have to take out of my own operating account. So as you can see, I have $53,967. So that's more than the budget that I have. So this is one of the most important parts of budgeting and most important parts of being the executive director or the person that's in charge of budgeting. You really have to remember budgeting, and a budget is a blueprint. It's not always going to be perfect, but you do have to stay under whatever your budget amount is. So some assumptions that you made, you may want to change just so that you can, mess with the numbers so that you can get everything where you want it. And by mess with, I mean, again, that this is a blueprint. No one stays 100% on budget because nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. Fuel prices may skyrocket, so this is going to be a lot more than I think. Equipment maintenance, we may have a couple of flat tires and they require that because we lease it, we take care of the flat tires, but they don't pay for those tires. So that would kind of blow our budget there as well. Insurance rates may go up, and they can go up at any time, and so that might be also something that we have to consider. So one of the things that I'm going to consider doing is seeing if somehow I can get so there's two things I can do. One is I can take off our personnel and reduce costs at the bottom somewhere, and assume that even though the executive director would have a responsibility for overseeing all programs, and the program director would as well. This is actually organization money, and so the person is being supervised with our own money instead of showing a funder that they actually have lines of supervision and those people are actually dedicated to those programs, which is one of the reasons why you show funding, to show that that person is actually paid to oversee that. But this is our own money. So I'm going to go ahead and take those two out. And you're going to see that we're only about $1,400 from where we should be. So I'm going to type in kind here, if I can type. And I am going to change this amount for the van rental and try to convince the person that's renting the van to us that it would help us tremendously if rather than $8,400, we could get it for $7,000 and they could take a tax break, which means that we're going to have our budget at $49,976. And so if I take that $7,000 and I divide it by 12, we're going to ask that we get our van for $583.33 forever cents per month for 12 months. And the in-kind amount, or the difference in what it was before and what it is now, is $116.66 And in my justification, I'm going to say that that amount is an in-kind amount that is going to be given to the organization, and it reduces our amount there so that we can actually make our budget. So now you can see that our budget is $49,976. You see my assumptions here so that when I write my budget justification, I'll have it. You can see my personnel here at the top. I have the individuals. This person, if you want to do your justifications here, you can also do it. Collect trip information. So that is what that person would do. And then the secretary, make appointments. And so you have what that person is doing. So that will help you when you write your justification if for each thing, drive the van, that will help you at the end. And this is general space. So now I have a complete justification for everything in my program. And I've thought about who else might need to be included, thought about the amount of time for a bus driver to drive, you know, that amount of time. So my van driver's 50% may be that he or she drives from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the morning, or noon until 5, etc. It may be supplemental transportation for those times when a client can't get on the metro or can't get on a bus or is outside of the normal times for delivery, etc. So I'm just going to make those assumptions so that I can build out the program, and you're going to be making those kind of assumptions as well. So hopefully this part was helpful so that you can see what you'll be thinking for your other programs. And let me just be clear, I'm not expecting that as you build these out that you're going to be 100% accurate. You're going to think of everything. Remember that this class is all about what would a budget look like, and what are some of these considerations. And you've seen some here when we've talked about assumptions, and who's going to be involved in the program, and how are you going to make it so that you can get underneath your funding amounts and not tear into some of the real costs that you have. Like, we know that the fuel is a real cost, but also knowing that this budget is just a template. And then how to get yourself around in Excel. So it's really the process that we want to be working on, and not those individual. So what kind of individual costs or more specific costs would you have? Because you really aren't going to know those until you've run a program and you kind of get that as second nature. So this sheet for our purposes is finished. Let's look at the agency budget sheet that we did. And now you're going to see that it's starting to fill in. So there's 2% for our data manager, 5% for our secretary, and those costs are there. And you're going to see the space costs have now come down from the other sheets. And all of our other assumptions are there, and the same at the bottom. So our equipment is there, just making sure everything. Our fuel is there, good. Our van is there, good. Our insurance, good. Everything's there. So now we're starting to get all of our costs added into our agency budget, which will happen when we do each one of these other ones. So the final thing that we have to consider is there is no indirect costs for this program, but all of my other programs, this one is RWJ, this one is CDC, this one's HRSA, this one's HRSA. I can get my indirect costs on each one of those. So I'm going to leave my indirect cost calculation here, take it out here, and leave it on all the others. And on the agency budget at the very end, as you can see, it's taking this total here, which you can see from the different pages. It's taking this total and multiplying it times the indirect rate of 26%, so that we can get the amount that we get to add into our budget that has no justification. You know, our indirect cost, as I said in the slide, is based on what we've already negotiated. So all that money that we collect in indirect is supposed to pay for all those things that can't be directly associated with the grants. So we're going to we're going to pay our utilities, we're going to pay our water, we're going to pay all of those things with our indirect costs because we can't cost those out to certain programs because it's used for everything and not at the same amount. So that's going to make this total at the end. What I'm going to do is complete my worksheet so that it's absolutely beautiful and finished. And then we're going to talk about the next time, as everyone's putting these all together, I'm going to show you how, once your complete budget is finished, to take out the indirect for those programs that are organization funded so that you can do that at the very end. But I want you to be able to start working on all of the other information. So that's going to conclude showing you the worksheets. Make sure that you have watched the slide presentation just to give you a little bit more information about some of the things that we talked about here. And I look forward to seeing your worksheets with everything populated so that we can have a good discussion about some of the hurdles that you faced and some of the frustrations with Excel if you had any. Now, if you don't know how to use Excel, it's very important that you team up with somebody probably locally with you that can help you sit down and do your Excel spreadsheets. I'm happy if you're in the area to meet with anyone individually in the office. But you really do need to also learn how to use Excel as for any of the work that you're going to do. It's really the best program for you to be able to do some of the things that we've done here. So enjoy the videos, and we will chat very soon.